So, wir haben 21:40 Uhr. Das heißt, wir können pünktlich anfangen mit dem heutigen Q&A zum ersten Dokumentarfilm bei FILMZ 2020 Forgotten Zinja. Wir haben heute zu Gast den Regisseur von Forgotten Zinja, Igal Hecht. Welcome, Igal, first off.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We're very happy to have you here. Wie Sie hören können, wird das heutige Q&A mit Igal auf Englisch stattfinden. Falls irgendjemand eine deutsche Übersetzung braucht für die Antworten von Igal, bitte eine kurze Nachricht schicken an den Account FILMZ-Festival des Deutschen Kinos und wir werden dann eine Übersetzung im Chat hier auf Zoom liefern. Alle Fragen können natürlich auch im Chat gestellt werden, auch an den Account FILMZ-Festival des Deutschen Kinos. Gerne auf Deutsch, noch lieber auf Englisch natürlich, aber wir werden es übersetzen, falls die Fragen auf Deutsch hereinkommen. Zu Igal. Igal Hecht ist in Israel geboren und lebt aktuell in Toronto, in Ontario, in Kanada. Und das ist natürlich eine der schönen Seiten dieses Online-Festivals, dass wir dieses Q&A jetzt trotzdem stattfinden lassen können mit Igal. Er arbeitet seit über 20 Jahren als Regisseur und Produzent bei seiner eigenen Produktionsfirma Chutzpah Productions und war in dieser Zeit an über 60 Dokumentarfilmen und über 20 Fernsehserien beteiligt. Forgotten Zinja ist sein aktuellster Film. Um präzise zu sein, konnten wir am heutigen Tage die Europapremiere dieses tollen Films erleben. Und er wurde erst kürzlich für das Filmfestival in San Pedro nominiert. Und wir hoffen natürlich, dass noch viele weitere Nominierungen folgen werden. I will switch to English right now and ask you the first question, Igal.
Sure.
Or rather, I would like to ask you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you became a director, and what kind of movies you make.
Sure. I've been in this business for almost 30 years, basically. So I'm 43. So I started when I was 13. Got my first camera, and there wasn't anything that I wanted to do. And so I've made about 60 documentary films, been involved with about 60, 40 of them have been mine. They've all premiered in Canada on Canadian televisions, nationally, and around the world. Some have been on Netflix and things along those lines as well. I mainly deal with documentary films. I deal with documentaries and television series that have an infotainment sort of aspect, biographies, history, contemporary art shows. I deal with, I've done a number of films about genocide, be it the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, Cambodia, and now one in Darfur. Sort of, I'm not sure why I'm fascinated by genocide, but I keep making films about genocide. And yeah, I love making documentary films. I think making documentary films is a privilege. It's amazing. I get to fly all over the world and meet some remarkable people. I get to tell some remarkable stories. They're not always depressing stories. Some of them are fun, pop culture based stories as well. It allows me to really creatively tell stories and bring stories that you might not have heard of to the forefront, make people aware of them. We had a little discussion before. Do I believe films can change the world? I don't think so. I don't think films have that power. I think what films have the power to do is inform people and make them aware of what's happening, and make them aware of stories that we're bombarded with news, and we're bombarded. I mean, the last week, there's nothing in the world except Trump and Biden, but everywhere else in the world, that's not the number one story. There are things that are happening that we're not aware of. So bringing stories like the Yazidi genocide or other stories to the forefront is something that I feel privileged to do, and I love doing that.
How do you think your filmmaking has evolved since you began directing and producing?
Well, I sucked when I first started, like really badly. But I'd like to think that I'm more capable of doing things now. But I have that independent spirit that I've had when I really started taking things seriously about 20 years ago. I still get out there, and whether there's funding or no funding, I'll still go and make the film. Technology has made life a little bit easier over the years. And so in terms of how it evolved, I'm not sure. I think that's not for me to say. That's for people who have seen my work or have followed me over the years to tell me. I've stopped filming everything handheld. So that's one involvement. That was back in 2008. Somebody told me you should really start using tripods, and I did. But in terms of involvement, I'm not sure. It's hard because I don't have a specific style in terms of my next film right now is going to be very voiceover driven. I haven't touched voiceover in 10
Mhm.
years. Sinjar has a more of a verite component to it, and I purposely wanted that. There's barely any talking head in Sinjar. If you actually look at the structure of the film, there's one interview in the beginning, and then we leave it. We never have an actual sit down interview, and that was consciously done. We had a lot of interviews that we filmed, and I wanted to try to make something that had a more of a verite component and feel to it. I try to change my style with every film. So I'm not sure how to answer that, but I think I'm getting better. At least I'd like to think so, but that's not really for me to judge. I do know that I keep making films. Whether
Mhm.
somebody likes my work or not, it doesn't really stop me, or it means I just like to create, and I just like to continuously make films because it's like air for me. It really is. I was having a walk with a fellow filmmaker last night. We're talking about filmmaking, and filmmaking for me is anything. It trumps, no pun intended, but it really trumps anything I have that's important to me. It is air for me. I love creating and I love producing, whether it's documentaries or TV shows or now and again short narratives for friends and colleagues. It's just it embodies my entire life.
Let's talk about the creation of Forgotten Zinja.
Mhm.
You already teased me a little bit that there was a really fascinating story about the production of the movie and how and when you decided to shoot it. So you want to talk about this real quick?
Sure. So originally, myself and and producer Aaron Daniel Mandel, who's a wonderful producer, and he's also the director of photography of the series.
Mhm.
Aaron's terrific. We I was approached by a woman here in Toronto who was telling me about the Yazidis back in 2016, or end of 2015. And she said there was a man by the name of Steve Maman, who lives in Montreal, Canada, who was briefly in the film, who was saving Yazidi people. He was Jewish, and so it got me fascinated. And some press reports came out about him. They called him the Jewish Schindler. So I started, oh wow, that's a great title for a movie. And so, I contacted him, and we went down to Montreal, and we decided to make a movie about him. And he was going to Greece. I was going to Poland to film another movie. And so I couldn't be there. So myself and Aaron couldn't be there. So we sent my colleague from Israel, a wonderful director of photography by the name of Lior Cohen, to follow Steve. And he did follow Steve a little bit there. But when Steve didn't want to be followed, he told him, just go find something else to do. And so Steve introduced them to Emma, and Lior started following Emma as a secondary character. And I wasn't there. I can't take credit for this. So a lot of credit has to be given to Lior Cohen, who's a brilliant filmmaker from Israel in his own right, and a great director of photography as well. So Lior started communicating with me and telling me, I have this woman named Emma. I'm following her. There were a few other characters, this little girl as well. I'm like, okay, just follow them. The focus is Steve. Let's remember that. Follow them when you can. And that's that. And so Lior did a great job. Unfortunately, the film with Steve didn't happen for a variety of reasons. And the film sort of sat. It sat in my hard drive till the fall of or the summer of 2017. I was
Mhm.
doing a number of other productions. And I remember waking up one night and just feeling that something was missed, that there was so much wonderful footage, and I really need to take a look at it to see what's happening there. And I don't speak Kurdish at all, obviously. And so the first thing was to get everything translated. And that took time. It's very hard to find somebody who can translate the Kurdish language appropriately
Mhm.
or properly. Uh, and so when that happened, I started just looking at the footage. And just by looking at the footage, I saw that there was something there, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. The scene at the hospital, I could. So just by because Emma spoke a bit of English to Lior, I could understand there was something that happening that happened there. And again, Lior speaks English and Hebrew. He doesn't speak Kurdish at all, or any German or anything like that. But he had that sensibility to understand that something was unfolding in front of his lens, and that he should just kind of hold on it. And so once I got the translation, I started reading through the notes, started looking at the scenes, and I decided to create a 7-minute demo just to see if there's a story here from that demo. And when I created that 7-minute demo, I realized there's a great story here. I need to find these people. And there were other people as well. There was a wonderful man by the name of Samir who's in the film for like a brief moment. And we followed him all the way to France. We actually filmed him in France. We followed him in France. And the decision that I made afterwards was, I'm going to not include him in the film. And so I wanted to focus on the women, and I wanted this to be more, I wanted this to be from the perspective of Emma. Because there was something about somebody who leaves the comfort of their home. You know, she had a comfortable life in Germany and then just decide I'm going to go and help my people. There was something about that really resonated with me. And so, and that's sort of how it kind of snowballed. So it was supposed to be a completely different film. And the other film would have been great as well. Steve is a wonderful man. I mean, he helped us by giving us some of the footage of Bayan being rescued. Ooh, that's another great story. I hope it comes through in the movie. We really had no clue who this woman was. Emma introduced us to her. Emma didn't know. The connection to Toronto, even though I cut it in the movie to make it seem as if we knew, that's my actually, if you listen to my reaction behind the camera, I'm actually saying, I said Mirza, because it didn't compute that this was the man who saved her. And this is a man who we followed in Toronto for about a year and a half. He's in the movie again for a brief moment. Decisions were made, but it was shocking. And that was also the last day of shooting. So the way it all kind of happened, I was just like blown away by it. I was like shocked, and I'm trying to get Mirza on the phone, asking him, "Are you this Mirza that she's talking about? Because if you are, this is insane." And just the way kind of the movie, that's how the movie got made. It was edited in Tel Aviv, and it was edited in Canada. So that's another, half of it was edited in Tel Aviv, half of it was edited in Canada. And yeah, it was an interesting sort of journey. It was a 4-year journey. And thankfully to our executive producer, Alex Williams, the Canada Arts Council, after 2 attempts, finally recognized the film as something that they want to get involved with, which enabled us to go back to Germany, because originally we went to Germany once. And we got some great stuff there, but I felt we needed to go back, but we had no funding. But because we already invested, Aaron and myself already invested our own funding in it, because we really felt that it was important for this film to get made. And then Canada Arts Council and the Ontario Council for the Arts, Media Arts Council came up and really helped us. And so I'm very thankful for that.
So obviously, since you shot this movie over a period of 4 years and you met so many different people, you had a lot of material, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And a lot of material you had to take out of the movie.
Yeah.
Was there anything in particular that you think about that you had to sacrifice, for the lack of a better term?
So yeah, there definitely has. I mean, I can tell you that just the characters of Mirza and Samir were remarkable. Samir especially, he was a wonderful man and an artist, and he made it to France, and the stuff we had with him in France was just beautiful. He's an artist, so we had the whole, and he paints imagery of the tragedy of what happened to the Yazidis, and then his brother comes to France, he's able to save his brother. So all of that was just remarkable, but I felt that too many characters spread over too many places will take away from the film. And I really believe that as much as the stories of a genocide of a people, the story of the women, what the women had to endure was something that I really wanted to focus on. And I mean, it's very hard for a male filmmaker to sit in a room, and even if you don't understand the language, to hear a woman speak about rape. and what was done to her. It's extremely hard, but you know, and but I really wanted people to understand that this is what was done. It was systematic, it was vicious, it was just. uh, I don't find a word. There isn't a powerful enough word to describe it, and it was unfolding, and everybody knew about it.
Mhm.
This wasn't done in some secret place and whatnot. It was unfolding in the world, in Syria. Everybody knew about it. Before these women were taken, um, the Allies, specifically the U.S. and Germany, could have stopped it. They chose not to. They chose to drop down food, and they chose to bring a CNN crew to film that, as opposed to just bombing ISIS as it was going up the mountain, Sinjar, and committing genocide. This all of this could have been stopped, and these people and these leaders chose not to. And so I wanted, and we don't focus on that in the film. So if you're asking me again to go back to your original question, how much we made a conscious choice to avoid that in the film. It just opened way too many doors. And you know, originally I wanted to make a film in which I criticized the Obama administration, the Merkel administration, the Kurds as well, who failed to protect the Yazidis. But then it just became one of those activist movies, and what would have happened was that the story of these people would have gotten lost along the way. You know, it would become, okay, great, I get to, you know, another filmmaker that goes, the politicians are bad, and so and attack, and it's an easy target, and rightfully so, because they did a horrible job, and they're guilty of allowing this genocide to happen. But I felt that there've been a lot of op-eds and a lot of small mini stories on the BBC and on Channel 4 and other channels. And so I just wanted to focus on the lives of these people. You know, what happens the moment they get to this camp in Greece? First of all, the life in a camp, you know, how do you live? And then what happens when they get to a place of safety? And definitely Germany was a place of safety. You know, the German government should be applauded for allowing refugees and these people to come in. I wish Canada allowed more than 1,200 Yazidis to come in. They've allowed 50,000 refugees from Syria to come in, but only 1,200 are Yazidis, up to 1,200. I'm not even sure they hit the 1,200 mark. So that's shameful when it comes to the Canadian government. Uh, the German government has done much more. And so the film, I wanted to show that, you know, and what happens to them. And the girl Azdahar is just remarkable. You know, she texted me because I finally showed her the movie, and she texted me in English. So if you think about this, you know, 3 years ago, she was in a camp, or 4 years ago, she was in a camp going through this trauma, and she speaks Kurdish, German fluently, English, just a remarkable young woman. And you know, that to me was a slut. To me, seeing that was great. It's a little bit of a happy ending. But so that's what I wanted to sort of focus on, their story as opposed to the bigger picture, because there have been other films that have focused on the bigger picture.
Mhm. There was one scene in particular that stood out to me a lot when you talked about trying to understand how the women felt and what they experienced, especially being raped, seeing people they know getting killed. In the beginning of the movie, you chose to visualize this brutal memory of one of the young girls by using animation.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you use this technique, and how do you think it adds to the movie?
So the animation, you know, my executive producer Alex was very critical of that, and you know, we went back and forth. I wanted to illustrate. So CSIS, which is our secret service here, which is our FBI or CIA here, they're probably monitoring my computers since I've downloaded so much ISIS footage from the dark web.
Mm.
Uh, and the original intent was to shock the audience and show the horrific things ISIS did. And then I chose not to. And so I had to find another way, and we went back and forth. Do we use the stock material that we have or we don't? And I felt that the animation, because As the Heart loves to draw, and because it's her stories that we're hearing, the moment before we go to the animation, she's drawing, and a lot of times she draws. Usually, it's not that kind of animation, obviously, but she draws Sinjar, or she draws a flower bleeding. So it gave me that license to tell her story, at least in my mind. Whether it's right or wrong, that's for the audience to decide. But for me, the thinking was, it gives me that license to tell her story through the point of view of a girl who would draw this. So it's almost like her drawing. And that's sort of where we went. That's why I chose to do that. I wanted people to understand that, yeah, this was as vicious as, and I don't think the animation does it justice. You know, this was as vicious as that animation points out. They showed up, they killed people, they shot at people. That's all they did. You know, that's what they did. And I think that they killed, they raped. There's mass graves all over the Sinjar mountain region that are constantly found of dozens of people being huddled together, usually men and boys, in which they murdered them in pits. And, you know, all of that happened. And so I didn't want to go grotesque with the beheadings and things like that that ISIS is known for. But I wanted people to also have some sort of that shock of this is what these people endured. And that's why animation was chosen, because it was, at least I thought, was the best and most effective way of doing that.
So Forgotten Zinja, it's has the subtitle "A Story of Survival," and I think your movie does show people who have suffered through a lot and who are still struggling. But we don't just see them as victims, but also as people who have hope and who have ambition and who are still living.
Right.
Especially the children in your movie.
Yeah.
Was this something that you wanted to focus on as well?
You know, it's a byproduct. I'm going to be honest. I think the film is depressing as hell. It was depressing to edit. You know, every now and again, when you make a movie, you hope for some sort of a happy ending or some little, and there's nothing here. You know, that conversation between the survivor and Emma, it was almost an hour-long conversation reduced to 8 minutes. It sucks the air out of the room. I remember editing. It took about 6 days to edit. It's depressing as hell. I'm glad that you think there's some sort of a happy ending there. I think, to me, As the Horror's life in Germany is a happy ending. Seeing her in class, the fact that she mastered the German language, the fact that she's now continuing life is a happy ending. But it's also sad to me, like, the fact that her last comment, why didn't anybody do anything, or why did they do this to us? It's extremely sad to me. And I don't know. In terms of, I think that in terms of them going on with life, I can tell you, doesn't exactly answer your question, but that they've definitely, their life, As the Horror's life has gone on. And I spoke to her yesterday. We're friends on Instagram. And so her life has gone on. She's doing really well. She's doing really well in school. She's flourishing, and her and her family are flourishing in Germany. And I think that's wonderful. That's wonderful to know. But the sad reality is, and we were speaking before, that 3,000 women, Yazidi women, are still unaccounted for. And 3,000 is just a number, roughly. Who knows? Could be more. They're unaccounted for. Nobody knows what happened to them. Murdered, sold into trafficking, spread all over the Middle East. There were reports. And one of the things we really wanted to, every story that we were told, there were horrific stories that even Yazidis told us, that it was a conscious choice not to put him in the movie. And had we put him in for shock value, it would have been great. And people would be like, oh, wow. But I think a lot of documentarians, when they hear a story from a subject, they're like, okay, great, we're going to put it in. I vetted every story. So every story that we were told, we really made sure that it actually happened. And so and the trafficking story, I can't for sure say that it has happened. that women have been trafficked, Yazidi women have been trafficked all over the Middle East. But there were definitely reports of men from various Arab countries across the Middle East coming to buy women in Raqqa when ISIS controlled it, from as well as from Turkey. So, you know, no one knows what happened to these women. Nobody cares what happens to these women. Nobody goes out to investigate what happens to these women. And that is such a tragedy. The 3,000 people are unaccounted for. It's not a small number. It's a massive number of people. And, you know, no one knows exactly what happened to them. And I don't know if we'll ever find out. So you might have women in various countries across the Middle East who are being used as you know, as just, you know, some to appease someone's sexual needs, and we'll never know, and or they might have been killed. And to me, that's just horrific. It's so sad. It's extremely tragic.
Before we continue, I would like to encourage our audience. If you have any questions, let us know. We will ask Igal whatever you want to know. And you mentioned 3,000 women still missing. We hear a lot of numbers on the news about people dying in wars, or especially in the Middle East. But we barely ever hear about individual fates, individual people. And your movie did show us individual people who have suffered. Right. Is this something that movies can do to maybe change one mind or two minds or three minds or even more minds?
I think women. I think a movie's job is to inform. So especially a documentary, you know, look, there's a variety of styles of documentaries. If you're gonna go in Michael Moore film, and by that I mean I'm of a huge. I think the documentary world owes a huge amount of credit to Michael Moore for existing, even like the documentary world existing. We owe a lot of, but you know, Michael Moore is a film which is has an agenda, and to me it's borderline propaganda, whether you're on the right or left. So there's activist movies, there's also movies that are just there to inform people. You know, people are like, what is the meaning behind your movie? What are you trying to say? And really, I'm not trying to say much. I'm trying to say this genocide happened, and I want you to be aware of it, and I want you to be aware of why it happened and the impact it had. And like you said, I can focus on 10,000 people or 6 million people or 1 million people, or I can focus on 3 people, and this is their story. And there's 10,000 more stories out there that should be told, but you know, no time, no budget, and I'm not sure if everybody will want to view that. But it's important. I think our job as filmmakers who do these kinds of movies in this kind of a genre is just to inform people. And if it impacts somebody to go to the politician and demand that an investigation happens to see what happened to the Yazidis, or somebody who watches this and has influence can go, okay, I can try and change and find out through whatever means how we can help these people, or someone in Germany can help more Yazidi refugees, then through, because they watched this movie and they're interested. That's really what I see this movie is doing. It's bringing this story to the forefront, and whoever watches it, whatever impact it has on them, that's really on them as individuals. You know, my job is to inform and to make people aware of a story they might not have heard of, or they might have heard something, but they don't really know what happened. And that's how I see my job being. And some people want to be activist filmmakers, and all the power to them. I don't fault them, and I think that's wonderful. I used to be an activist filmmaker. I think you get more out of just being a filmmaker that informs and makes people aware of what happened. I think, but there isn't one way of doing that. You know, there isn't one way of just doing film. Some people will totally disagree with me, and I'm more than happy to say that they're right, because that's the kind of film they want to do. Where I am in my career, I find that me telling a story about the Yazidis or about the Rwanda genocide or elections in Israel or the First Nations rights here in Canada, and just telling their story without in a more of a neutral way, not objectively, not in an objective way, but more of a neutral way. Um, and there is slight difference. Makes really, I think, has a better impact than me saying, I'm right, and here's why you should follow me and why you should listen to me. I think people are lazy and they believe everything they see in a documentary. And in a lot of documentaries, a lot of things that you see are done in a subjective way for you to just follow one sort of narrative. And in reality, it's not black and white. And so in this particular movie, it was easier for me to just basically allow the camera. You barely hear me. I think you hear me twice. Aaron and Lior did an amazing job filming it, and then just allow the camera to sort of, and the action that's unfolded in front of the camera to tell the story, as opposed to me saying you should follow this and this belief. And I don't feel that I have the responsibility to tell a viewer what to think. I have a responsibility to show the viewer what the reality is.
Is this also what you look for in movies that you watch and that you like to watch?
I watch horrible movies. I honestly, my film school days are over. So uh, if there's a great film out there, I hate watching documentaries because I'm often jealous because they're brilliant, and then I'm like, how did I not make that? So it's more jealousy than anything else. It's pity. It's really petty jealousy. But when I when I watch a film, it's for sheer entertainment, because I find I deal with a lot of depressing subject matters, and so I just want to watch something stupid where and Marvel is wonderful for that. It's so much fun. So I'm not a film snob. I'm not a film snob. So I'll watch anything and everything. I have my moments where I want to watch my artistic, more in-depth film, and then I have my moment where I just want to watch something stupid and not really think. And I think there's a space for film, and I think if you love film, there's a space for all of that. And in documentaries as well, I love I love getting involved with documentaries that only deal with music. I've been involved with 3, and they've been terrific. They've been great to work on. We're not changing the world, but it's sheer beautiful entertainment, and it's great. So, yeah.
There's one thing that interests me in particular. You did one movie, which is called The Sheik, about
Yes.
former pro wrestler the Iron Sheik. So that's
Absolutely.
so that was probably more of an entertaining movie to do, right? Because he's such
Oh, that was
such a
pure
special.
pop culture.
Mhm.
Yeah. It has The Rock, Dwayne Johnson in it. It has, I love wrestling. So first of all, I love wrestling. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I watch wrestling to this day. AEW, AEW, and WWE. I love it. I take my nephew to all the live events when they come to Toronto. And so when the opportunity came to be involved with the Sheik, I loved it. I jumped on it. I got to meet all my favorite wrestlers growing up.
Mhm.
I got to meet huge movie stars. Pure fun. His story was remarkable. We have him, we film him. He's a great guy. He's a funny guy. Interesting, with a remarkable life outside and inside of the ring. Used to be a crack addict, and we filmed him
Mhm.
using crack, and his downfall, and then his eventual life change, and becoming in fixing up and really fixing his life. And so it was great. It was a lot of fun. It got a lot of it. It got so much attention. It premiered in the Hot Dogs Festival, and then it went on to do a lot of festivals. Then it went on Netflix and on Prime, and it's my biggest film, so I'm very, very proud of it. It's just sheer fun. Um, I got to go to the U.S. I remember, to 2 wrestling conventions and just meet all my childhood heroes. And if you love wrestling and you get to meet, uh, Jake the Snake Roberts and Brother Love, Bruce Pritchard, and you know, Mick Foley and people like that. And if you love wrestling, you know who those people are. They're icons.
Yeah.
You get to sit in a room with them and you get to talk wrestling and you get to talk about the match that you remember as a kid, and pure fun. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there are going to be a few people who are really going to love this part. Just all the name dropping and all the memories that
Yes,
come up with this.
yes. Check it out. It's on. I think it's. I'm not. No, it's not on Netflix, but it's definitely on Prime on Amazon, or you can watch it on iTunes. And yeah, yeah. I'd love to plug that. That's a great movie to plug. It's a fun movie.
Please let us know about the movie you're working on right now. I mean, you told me you have been working recently, and about your future projects and plans.
Right. So I'm currently working on. So I deal a lot with Israel as well. So I film a lot in Israel, and I'm currently working on a film called My Elections. And the film is in. Yeah, for those of you who are politically minded, Israel had 3 historic, unprecedented elections in a span of a year. Never happened before. And so when the first election happened, I just so happened to be in Israel. So I said, I'll stay and I'll make a movie about the elections, because it was either Netanyahu was going to stay in power or not. It was going to be historic either way. No one envisioned this being such a historic year and a half, where 3 elections happened, and then a government, and then COVID. Now constant protest outside Netanyahu's home on a weekly basis. I just came back from Israel where I filmed, so I flew twice during this pandemic to film this. And then a possible 4th election, most likely in December or January, which means I have to fly back again. And so what started off as a 3-month project is now evolved into a 2-year project, which will probably end up being a 4-year project. And we have anybody and everybody in this film, minus Netanyahu, which we have in the film, but not one-on-one, but we have everybody who ran against them, including Benny Gantz, who is the vice premier in Israel right now. And so that's the current film. It's great. It's a lot of fun. I will probably go into bankruptcy by the time it's done. It's being self-funded. It's okay. It's being self-funded, and I'm really proud of the film, and I think it's going to be one of my last political films for a long, long time. It really delves into Israel and Israeli democracy and what happens there, and the impact of authoritarian governments throughout the world. You know, Trump lost today, and so the impact will be felt in Israel for sure, and see how that transforms. But it's not I don't criticize Israel like most Israeli filmmakers will. I think it's very easy. I think people just want to see Israel being criticized. I actually look at a democracy, a vibrant democracy, unlike any democracy in the world, where 35 parties ran, where there were 3 elections, where minorities got 20% almost of the seats. And so it's an interesting view of it. And we're following 3 ministers, and one of them is an openly gay justice minister who belongs to the conservative Likud government, and we're the only ones who got access to him. I'm not too sure why, but he trusted me, and it's just a remarkable, it's a great, great movie. If you love politics, you're interested in Middle East politics, but just in politics, and to see how crazy leaders are during an election. I'm sure in Germany it's the exact same case to some degree, or all over the world.
Yeah.
This is a great film, and it's my first sort of POV director's film. So I will be Michael Moore in this film, at least in a sense of voiceover, and I'm in the film, and I get into a lot of interesting situations with politicians who, at least 3 of them pushed me and physically pushed me because I annoyed them, and it was fun. So that's really the big one. And then there's another one about a comic book artist who draws. His name is Yaakov Levy, and he draws a comic book that is borderline pornography in the style of Archie. But he used to be a former Orthodox Jew who ended up in a prostitution house in the Ukraine, and then became a filmmaker who had a big following, cult following in Eastern Europe, and then does these comics and gets detained in a Canadian airport for obscenity laws, and the movie sort of goes from there. But if you like Larry David and Woody Allen, and you understand Jewish sort of neurotic complex, this guy is everything into one, just through comic books. So I've been following him for 3 or 4 years now, and it's an interesting film. It's been filmed in 4 different countries. He's a very fun. It's going to be a very funny, weird movie. So those are the 2 projects. They're great.
I will keep an eye on this and hopefully get to see it soon. One final question before we go. How has this current situation of the pandemic in the world impacted your process of filmmaking, other than, as you mentioned, making it longer to film a movie, of course?
So unlike other people, I'm terrified of the pandemic. I'm very much a believer in wearing masks, and anybody who doesn't want to wear masks, especially now that I always say, now that winter's coming in Canada, we have the same winter as you do in Germany. I hope those people who refuse to wear masks also don't wear scarves around their faces. I think it's just fair. But so I'm very terrified of the pandemic, but I think I was in Israel when it hit, and I was on the last Air Canada flight out of Israel because they shut the border down. And when I flew out, I came back to Toronto. I wasn't going to let the pandemic dictate my career because I had other productions to make and other films to make. And so I basically just kept working. I've been quarantining since 2000. For the most part, I do the editing and the color correction and the audio. So, my studio is my studio. I'm constantly alone here. So I work here. And then when I have to fly, I fly. I flew to Israel twice. I had a shoot in Europe that got canceled. So that was the only impact, really. In Canada, we keep safe. We keep relatively safe. We wear masks. You put on a longer zoom lens, and you physically distance yourself as much as you can. In Israel, I was filming in these unbelievable protests in Jerusalem, and you wear a mask and you hope for the best. If you have a film to make, and and history's unfolding, you can't just sit by and say, okay, I'll get it the next time, because there won't be a next time. But I've also had films now that have been delayed till next year. So I'm doing an archaeology film next year, and that's been pushed back, and that's fine. It's great. So but in terms of has it stopped or anything? I know a lot of filmmakers, it has stopped. I didn't let cancer stop me from working, so I'm not gonna let a pandemic from stopping me from working. So if I have a film to shoot and it can't wait, I'm gonna go and shoot it, and I'll be as careful as I can be.
All right. Thank you so much, Igal, for taking your time.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting the film. I'm really excited. I'm really happy that people got to see it, and you guys have been awesome with your Instagrams and everything. So thank you for that.
Thank you for all these compliments. Is there anything else you want to say before we leave?
No, no. Good. Have a wonderful evening there or night in Germany.
Yes. No. Thank you. And you have a wonderful day, or whatever's left of this.
Thank you.
Yes. And of course, we would also like to thank our sponsors for this documentary competition, which is the Schüren Verlag in Germany, and also Atelier 55, who provided us with some awesome face masks, because, as Igal said, wearing a mask is important and you should do it. And they provided us with some that we plan to wear in theater. Now we're wearing it to go shopping.
Nice.
And I will switch to German real quick to plug the rest of our programming. Das war der letzte Programmpunkt für heute. Es ist ja auch schon spät geworden. Morgen um 15 Uhr steht unser lokaler Kurzfilmwettbewerb an. Mit Q&A um 17 Uhr mit diversen Filmschaffenden von allen Filmen, die wir zeigen. Um 18 Uhr ist unser zweiter mittellanger Slot mit den Filmen Die Schwinge des Geistes und Flatliner. Und auch für diesen Slot gibt es ein Q&A um 19:10 Uhr mit Albert Meisel von Die Schwingen des Geistes. Und zu guter Letzt, den Abschluss des Tages, bildet um 20:30 Uhr der zweite Dokumentarfilm-Slot mit dem Film Sylvia is My Name und dem Vorfilm A Way of Breathing. Auch hier ein Q&A um 21:50 Uhr mit Max Benio von Sylvia is My Name. Damit verabschiede ich mich für heute von unseren Gästen und unseren Zuschauern. Vielen Dank, dass ihr dabei wart und bleibt uns weiter treu. And goodbye to you, Igal.
Goodbye. Thank you so much. Take care.